Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is an introduction to the F15C in DCS. So, I kind of want to put this together to where some of y'all might be able to help understand the aircraft and everything that it offers. So we're going to start this by going over the instrument panel. First things that we're going to do is we're going to go over the MFDs, or your displays. You're going to have your stores page for your weapons. You're going to have your nose radar screen for active radar when you're scanning for air targets. You're going to have obviously your HUD, and then you're also going to have your RWR over here on the right side. Your RWR is going to be used for when you have both air and ground targets pop up. They're going to send off a radar signature. 9 times out of 10, it will tell you if it's, for example, a MiG-29 or a SA-3 site or etc. Now, once we go from there, we're going to start from left to right on your different different gauges. Your first gauge up here on the left, up on the top, is going to be your knots and Mach gauge. You can see that it goes 1.5 to etc. The big numbers are going to end up being your knots on how fast you're going times 100, and then down below that is going to be your Mach speed. It's going to be it's going to say 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2. I believe it goes up to 2.5 in this aircraft. After that, you're going to have your angle of attack just below, and that'll be how many, more or less, your G meter or your AOA. So in other words, the more you turn, displacement on your actual movement forward. So say we're horizontal, we're flying forward at say 400 knots. The more you start pulling back on the stick, your angle of attack is going to go up, but your plane is more going to go forward than it is going to go up, causing you to create drag and start losing your airspeed. So you have to kind of keep an eye on that, but most of that's also going to be up on your HUD, which we'll go over later. Next, we're going to end up having your G meter. This is just below that, which will tell you how many G's you're putting on the aircraft or how many G's you're pulling during a turn, etc. After that, we're going to have right here in the center, which is this blue on top, black on bottom in this aircraft. It's going to be your relative flight gauge. This will tell you how your aircraft is flying relative to looking forward. The blue is obviously going to be towards the sky, and then from the center line down into the black is going to be ground. So that'll let you know if you're flying away from the ground or towards the ground, etc., relative to the center. After that, right below that, we're going to have your horizontal compass. So in the center, you'll see that you have a big horizontal line, and then right below that is going to be a smaller horizontal line. That is relative to your plane. So the big horizontal line is going to be kind of like your wing, and then the smaller one is going to be for, say, your elevators or for your rear of the aircraft. So that'll let you know your heading. So obviously, like right below that towards the tail, where the S is at, that's going to be directly behind you. And then obviously up at the very top is going to be your heading, where the aircraft is pointing. Right after that, to the right of that, you're going to have your altimeter. That'll tell you your, obviously on how high you are relative to ground level. Actually, I believe that is relative to sea level. Right below that, you're going to have your climb rate, which is in increments of 1,000 feet per minute. So it'll tell you your up and down relative on, as you can see on the top and bottom of the gauge. If you're going up, 1 is 1,000 feet per minute, 2 is 2,000, etc., all the way up to 6. Same goes for your down. If you're headed downwards, it'll tell you obviously how fast you're descending, 1,000 feet per minute, 2,000 feet, etc. After that, right below that, you have your clock. It just tells you your time of day relative to the game. So if you want to know what time it is during your mission in-game, then you can take a look at that and see what time it is on the server. To the right, up at the top, you're going to have your RPM percentage gauges for left, right, or for your left engine and right engine, respectively. When you're starting up your engine, which we'll go over this in a minute, you want to wait to taxi or anything else. You'll be fully started up at around 69%. But we'll go over this here in a bit. Right below that, you have your temperature gauge for each engine, left and right respectively. Right below that, you have your fuel flow, which is measured in pounds per hour. And I believe it's times 10. So the 10 is 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 300 pounds, 400 pounds, etc. And it'll also tell you in the dial up there at the top on how many pounds of fuel you're burning per engine per hour. Right below that, you have your nozzle positioner gauge, left and right respectively. Now, those will 9 times out of 10 be at 0 if you're at mill power, from what I'm gathering. Once you start hitting afterburner, it'll tell you your percentage from 0% afterburner to 100% afterburner. So that would be something to where you can keep an eye on. Right to the right of that, the top gauges that are in like this 5 grouping over here, that is hydraulic gauges, but as far as I know, they don't work. I'm not sure. I've only been able to see the needle move slightly whenever you're pressing your brakes on the ground, but I really haven't paid attention to those. Right below that is going to be your fuel quantity gauge. It'll tell you how many your total pounds are, what your internal fuel is, your left and right internal tanks there, respectively, and then that number will go up in total poundage if you are carrying bags, whether it be 1 in the center or 2 wings or all 3. So that gives you a good little rundown of what's going on your instrument panel. I hope that has helped you out a little bit on understanding the inside of your aircraft as far as for your gauges. And here in just a minute, we will resume to where I can show you the startup procedure, and we'll continue on from there. Alright, now that we've covered your instrument panel, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go through your startup procedure. So, first thing we're going to want to do to bring your electronics up online is going to be right shift L. That's going to bring up power to your aircraft. Once we have this done, if you want to change the weapon loadout for your aircraft to add bags, add some 120s, I want to add a couple AIM-9s, all you hit is backslash to bring up your comms, and then you would hit F8 and then F1 for refuel. That way you're able to bring all that up. For me, all I have to do is talk to my voice attack, but we'll go over that in a different section. Once you're done reloading and it says that everything is complete, and you make sure that your bags and everything are good to go, your weapon loadout's correct, then we're going to hit right shift home, and that's going to start up the engine process. Now, once this engine process starts, you're going to notice that it's going to start from right engine to left engine. As you can see right now, your RPM gauge over here on the right is starting to climb in RPMs. It'll get up to roughly around 80. You'll hear the APU wind down, and then that engine will come back down to around 69% RPM. Then it'll start on the left engine process. Once this is all done, then we will be good to taxi towards the runway. Okay, now that we have the engine started, we are going to go ahead and taxi down here to runway 3 left. So, all you would do is apply power, and we will taxi to runway. Okay, so it seems that we're going to go to runway 3 right. So, instead of turning right, we're going to turn left. It's such a good day for a flight. So, once we get down here to the runway, then we will proceed with the takeoff procedure. Okay, now that we're on the taxiway, we're going to go ahead and do brakes down. We're going to full throttle. So we'll probably run it up to 90. There you go. And brakes out. We're in burner. There's a slight crosswind today. Oh boy. Now we're at 200 knots. We'll go ahead and rotate. And then brakes up. And flaps. Isn't it such a beautiful day today? Okay. Now since we're in the air, then we'll go ahead and get ready to bring you into the next part of the lesson, which will be your weapons and how to bring up air targets and try to bring those bastards down. So we'll see you there. Okay, now that we have taken off, now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to try to explain the radar and the functionality and uses for the radar. So, right now, I have the video paused, or the game paused, rather. But what we're going to do is as soon as I unpause, we're going to hit the castle switch back, or left. Okay? That'll turn on the radar. Okay, now that our radar is on, you can see down here in the radar system, which is right there, you can see several different things that it's given us. Up at the top right hand corner, it says 20. That means it's searching out to 20 nautical miles. Now, the way that this explains is every one of those horizontal lines is increments out. So in this case, it's going to end up being every line is 5 nautical miles. So bottom line is right there at our jet. Next line up is going to be 5 miles. Middle line, 10. Top next to top line is going to be 15, and then the top is 20. And here in just a second, I'll explain on how you change your everything out in, etc. Now, over on the left-hand corner, or I say corner, it's around the middle, you're going to see the numbers 21 and 10. that means that our radar cone is searching from a lowest altitude of 10,000 feet up to a ceiling of 21,000 feet. So that's kind of our spread in cone. And then we have, I believe it's around 80 degrees in front of us, left to right for horizontal cone. Down at the very bottom, it says 1 MED, which means that there is someone that is hot coming in. If it says high, then it's cold. Or it's vice versa. It's one of those two. The G down there gives us our ground speed, which is of 434 knots. Our true airspeed is 436 knots. Now, once we get ready to move with our radar, which we can already tell that there is a hostile out in front of us, giving that our RWR is saying that there is a 29 directly in front of us. So basically every dot is like a number for a clock. For instance, your 6 o'clock is directly behind you, 12 o'clock is in front, 3 o'clock to your right, and then 9 o'clock to your left. Now, when we get ready to attack, so say we're going here, then we're going to use our middle rocker switch up to change our, well, that's showing our scan for high and low. Okay. Now we move our rocker forward or up, then we'll notice out to 80 that he's right here on us. Okay. So with that being said, we can see that we have a contact directly in front of us at roughly 40 nautical miles. With that, we're scanning from an altitude of 0 all the way up to 37,000 feet at this range. Given that he's directly in front of our cone, he's in the middle of our sector, and then from top to bottom tells us our range. So since he's at the middle line at 80 miles, divide that by 2, you're at 40. So he's roughly around 40 nautical miles in front of us. So with that being said, then you can depress your analog stick, your index finger that's shown on the screen, and you'll be able to lock this target up. So you go up to where you... There. So now he's locked. Right at 40 nautical miles. Able to lock him up. Okay? So with that being said, you can tell up there at the top that it's saying that what his heading is, 269. You can see his trajectory in the middle, right there where the cursor's at. The long line going down means that's his front. And then you can tell wings and rear. So he is heading directly toward us, or towards us rather, because it looks like it's flying towards the bottom. You can tell our closure rate over here on the right hand side in the middle at 742. It means he's going roughly the same speed that we are. The left hand side, where the arrow is, and you see 14/9, that tells you his altitude. So he's at 14.9 right now. If he was at, so 14,900 feet. Now, with that being said, once we have him locked up there, then we can hit the pyramid toggle switch and press back or left, and that'll bring up our 120Cs. Okay, so bringing that back in will bring us into our, I believe it's BFM. It'll show here up on the screen. But once you bring that up, then this is what it'll look like up on your radar or on your HUD. Okay? So we have him locked up. We've brought in our bore sight. Or not bore sight. We brought in our beyond visual range. And we should be able to see him lock up here pretty soon. Now you can see as soon as I bring that up, it tells us that we have our 120Cs selected. And we should be getting ready to lock him up. Now, with that being said, it only gives you a certain amount. That's more, I believe this is actually our visual range. If we press forward or right on our pyramid, it brings up our visual. And then with that, we can bring our radar up. Yep, see he's right here, he just popped up. And we can lock him up. Now once we have him locked up, he's at 15.9 at a closure of 694. And you can see down in the HUD, let me pause it here real quick. You can see in the HUD that it says down here on the right hand corner side that his range is 31.6 nautical miles away from us. Okay. It also is represented up here at the top because it says 40. You can see where he's at with his closure rate of 696. And then once he gets down around 20, we should be within range for our 120s. So let's bring him into range. Go ahead and bring up throttle. You can see he's at 30 nautical miles now. And you can tell that our closure rate is going through the roof now at this point. Because now since I've hit burners, I'm burning towards him a lot faster than he's coming towards me. Now, once we get here within about 20 miles, I believe it is, then we should be ready to shoot. You can tell that the sight, the picture is getting bigger, which means that he's coming into range. And you'll see up here in these two corners of the screen, your lights right there. Your two lights have turned yellow. That means you're within shooting range. You have solution, you can fire. Once that's said, with the 120Cs, then all you have to do is hit your weapon release button and hold it down for a second or two, and then you'll have a missile on its way. Once that happens, then obviously you've got one headed straight for the target. You can tell it's tracking. And it looks like it's lost target. So there's something that we need to understand, is that even though we have went in range, it's probably not a good idea to try to fire at that range. Now, we are at 7 nautical miles. Let's fire a second. There's a second. That one's burning. Looks like it's got good track. And splash. We've shot down the target. Really simple. My personal opinion is try not to fire until you're roughly around 15. Like 10 to 15, that's usually a good distance for 120s, especially if you're going up against somebody like an SU-27, for example, like we saw here. Now, in the next section, then we're going to go over the AIM-9s, and we will figure out how to go through that weapon select. Okay, now that we have went through the 129C, let's go with the AIM-9M next. So, let's go ahead and get this going. Again, target will be out roughly around 40 nautical miles in front of us. So, we'll unpause. Go ahead and hit the castle switch left or rear. Turn on your radar. And then we'll go ahead and hit, I believe, we will go ahead and hit pyramid switch forward again to bring into beyond visual range. And you'll see this. Now, once we get close to the target, then right now we have our 120Cs selected, as you can see here. Now for me, on the joystick, it's button 4, but depending on what your setup is for your joystick, then you hit your weapon select button. That'll bring us to our 120 or our aim 9Ms. Now once we're in aim 9s, this is the button that we have going on, or the HUD display, because it has a bore sight for a heat signature. Now we can use our slew, our index finger, and go ahead and start going out towards our target, which we already see him here, and we have him locked up. Now, for the aim 9M, you have roughly around 10 nautical miles to fire. I suggest 5, but that just gives a higher probability of being able to hit. So, we'll go ahead and aggress towards the target. And once we get quite close to him, then we will go through how to go about taking this guy down. Okay, he is roughly around 10 nautical miles now in front of us, as you can see up on the nose. Okay, he's within seeker head range. He's at 6 nautical miles now. Right there. Okay, so as you can see, he's 3 nautical miles. So to effectively be able to hit an oncoming target, probably need to be close to around 3 to 4 nautical miles, 5 if you're lucky, to be able to successfully hit this target with an aim 9M. Now, the issue with that is that the aim 9 is really, really good for close range. So if you're in the middle of a dogfight, or if somebody popped out, right close to you, you get on him, and if he's close enough, you can pop him with an aim 9. Very hard to defeat, but it is possible. So sometimes you might want to make sure you have more than one. You might have to fire more than one at the target. Now, at this particular part, because he is so close, say you miss it, for example. Okay, so let's. Right there would have been a great opportunity and be able to get the guy. Right? So, since we're pulling, right here is where we're going to have to start really pulling our punches. So, you can activate what is called Close Air Combat Bore Sight Mode, okay, which is the pyramid down. So, we'll bring that in right there. That means it does not require a radar lock to get this guy. As soon as the aim 9 seeker head locks onto this target, you can fire it immediately without ever having to worry about radar if you're close enough to the target. You can also bring in what's called Close Air Combat Vertical Scan, which helps in guns and with most of these missiles, that it just scans up and down directly in front of you. So if you're needing to find a target and you can get in behind him, but you can't deal with trying to find him and lock him up on radar, if you're constantly trying to do basic flight maneuvers to keep him behind him, then you activate your combat vertical scan mode, which is the pyramid left or back, which is right here on the screen, and that will activate that mode to help you out. So, given the situation that we're in, we'll try to see if we can't figure out where this guy's at. He's directly above us. Fire. Notice how immediately in bore sight mode that it locked on? Splash. Fairly simple. And there he goes. And then right back into bore sight for the next one. Okay, so now since we have covered how to use your weapons effectively, I want to go over one mode of the radar that I did not go over before. And it is the toggle switch on the castle. It's the castle switch forward or right that brings up your radar RWS and TWS mode selects. Okay, so what we'll go ahead and do is we hit castle switch left, bring on your radar, and then you can hit castle switch right and it brings in your modes. Okay, so right there is RWS, and then there's TWS. Now, the differences between these two radars is, because they do have pros and cons. The RWS is your standard radar, and it is basically a high energy beam from the nose of your plane to lock onto long range targets. But the only, and it's extremely hard to defeat. Once you're locked on, you've got to do some crazy stuff to be able to lose the beam tracking from an F15 in RWS. But the problem is it can only lock one target. So when you're scanning, and it can find targets very easily because it is a strong radiation beam, but you can only lock one target at a time. And as soon as you lock onto a target, it will show on the enemy's system that they have been locked. Now, you can switch it to TWS mode, and you can lock multiple targets. It is called track while scan. And so you're able to lock onto a target and still scan to where you can lock on to more than one target. But because it's a less intense, it's a low radiation beam, it will not show up on the hostile radar. So in other words, say you lock onto somebody and they immediately try to evade. Okay, they try to turn cold because they're getting locked. You can switch from RWS to TWS and still keep the lock on them, but since it cuts the energy beam in half, their radar no longer will say that they're being locked. So then you can bait them basically to try to attack you again and be able to shoot them down. The only issues with that is that it's extremely easy to beat. Like, all they have to do is basically just turn off course slightly and be able to beat the lock because it's not strong. And you can only lock at short ranges, again, because the energy beam is so, the radiation from it is so weak. Now, the cool thing is, though, with TWS, is that it immediately shows you what their altitude is, no matter what. So if they're trying to fly extremely low in RWS, it's really hard to lock somebody up that way, especially, and you won't be able to tell what their altitude is 9 times out of 10 below a certain altitude. But when you're flying in TWS, you'd be able to see them and know exactly on what altitude that they're at. So it gives a little bit of a different aspect on what to think, you know, in different ways that you can use all of it. And yeah, so with all that in mind, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it lets you know a little bit more about your plane, and hopefully you get to shoot some assholes out of the sky. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.